Atheist returns from death with a shocking message from Jesus. Sarah had always been a woman of conviction. Born into a family that valued intellect and reason above all else, she grew up surrounded by books, scientific discussions, and a deep-seated skepticism of anything that couldn't be proven by facts or figures. Her father, a physicist, and her mother, a professor of philosophy, instilled in her the belief that the universe operated according to strict natural laws. To Sarah, life was a series of cause and effect equations neatly solved by logic and evidence. As a young girl, she had been curious about religion, not because she felt a pull toward it, but because it fascinated her how so many people could believe in something intangible. She asked her parents about God once, and their response was as detached as she had expected. "People believe in God because it helps them make sense of the world," her mother had said, "but we prefer to rely on what we can prove." That explanation satisfied Sarah at the time. If anything, it solidified her path. By the time she reached her 20s, Sarah's atheism had grown into a defining part of her identity. She excelled in her studies, earning a degree in biology and later pursuing a career in environmental science. Her work often brought her into contact with individuals of diverse beliefs, but her discussions with them only reinforced her views. She took pride in her ability to dismantle religious arguments with calm logic. To her, faith was an outdated relic of a less informed past, a way for people to avoid confronting the harsh realities of existence. Sarah's social circle mirrored her beliefs. Most of her friends were academics or professionals who shared her worldview. They would gather for wine-fueled discussions about the absurdity of religious dogma, exchanging stories of awkward encounters with overly zealous believers. Sarah was particularly adept at telling these stories, often recounting her debates with preachers who tried to hand her pamphlets on street corners, or co-workers who invited her to church events. Her wit and sharp tongue made her a favorite at these gatherings. But Sarah's atheism wasn't just intellectual, it was personal. She had suffered losses in her life: friends, a beloved younger brother, and, most painfully, her first and only child. Her daughter, Emma, had died of a congenital heart defect at the age of 3. Sarah had clung to science during that time, finding solace in the medical explanations rather than the well-meaning but infuriating assurances from religious acquaintances that her daughter was in a better place. To Sarah, there was no better place. There was only here, and Emma was gone. That loss hardened her. She became more vocal in her atheism, more determined to reject any notion of an afterlife or divine plan. If there was a God, she reasoned, why would he allow such suffering? Why would he take an innocent child from her? The idea of a benevolent creator felt not just illogical, but insulting. By her 50s, Sarah had achieved a great deal. She had a successful career, a cozy home, and the respect of her peers. Yet, beneath her confident exterior, there was a restlessness she couldn't quite explain. She buried herself in work, took up hobbies like gardening and painting, and volunteered at a local animal shelter. But the gnawing feeling persisted. On quiet nights, when she sat alone with a glass of wine, her thoughts would drift to questions she didn't want to ask. What if I'm wrong? She quickly dismissed such thoughts, chalking them up to natural human fears of mortality. Sarah's life took a surprising turn when she began experiencing chest pains. At first, she ignored them, attributing the discomfort to stress or indigestion. She had always been in good health, rarely visiting doctors unless absolutely necessary. But the pains grew sharper and more frequent, forcing her to confront the possibility that something might be seriously wrong. One crisp autumn morning, While tending to her garden, Sarah felt a sudden, crushing pain in her chest. It radiated down her left arm and left her gasping for breath. She collapsed onto the damp earth, her vision blurring as panic set in. The world around her seemed to fade, the bright colors of her flowers dimming into a gray haze. As her consciousness began to slip away, a single thought echoed in her mind. Is this the end? In the moments that followed, Sarah's carefully constructed world of logic and reason would be shaken to its core. As Sarah drifted away from consciousness, she felt a peculiar sensation, something she couldn't immediately describe. It was as if the world around her was unraveling, the familiar noises of her garden fading into an eerie silence. There was no wind, no rustle of leaves, no distant hum of the city. Only an emptiness that stretched infinitely. She became aware of her body growing lighter, as though the physical weight she had carried all her life was suddenly gone. At first, there was darkness, an overwhelming, impenetrable blackness. It wasn't like closing her eyes or being in a dark room. This darkness was vast, suffocating, and absolute. Sarah tried to move, but she found she had no sense of her body. She didn't feel pain, but she also didn't feel comfort. There was only an unsettling stillness. The silence was deafening, pressing against her like an invisible force. Panic began to set in. Her thoughts raced, but they were disjointed and chaotic. Where am I? What's happening? Am I dead? The last question hit her with a jolt of terror. She had never believed in an afterlife, yet here she was, experiencing something. Her mind reached for logic, for a rational explanation, but there was none. This wasn't a dream. She was certain of that. It was too vivid, too real. Time seemed meaningless in this void. It could have been seconds or hours before Sarah noticed a subtle change. At first, it was almost imperceptible, a faint glimmer in the distance, like a single star in an endless night sky. As she focused on it, the light began to grow, slowly at first, then more rapidly. It wasn't blinding or harsh. Instead, it radiated a warmth that felt both alien and familiar. The light pulsed gently, as though it were alive, beckoning her. Despite her fear, Sarah felt an inexplicable pull toward the light. It wasn't a physical force, but something deeper, as though it were calling to her very essence. She resisted at first, clinging to the remnants of her skepticism. This can't be real, she thought. It's just my brain misfiring as I die. But even as she tried to rationalize the experience, the light continued to grow, enveloping her in its glow. When the light finally reached her, Sarah expected to feel overwhelmed or consumed, but instead, she felt embraced. It was unlike anything she had ever known, a profound sense of peace that washed over her, dissolving her fear and confusion. The warmth of the light seemed to penetrate every part of her, filling her with a love so intense it brought tears to her eyes, if she still had eyes to cry from. It was as though this light knew her, truly knew her, in a way no one ever had. It saw her faults, her pain, her doubts, and yet it loved her unconditionally. Then she became aware of a presence. It wasn't like encountering another person. It was more like an awareness that joined hers, an entity so vast and profound it defied description. Yet, despite its magnitude, it felt gentle and personal, as if it existed solely for her in that moment. Sarah instinctively knew who it was, though her mind rebelled against the recognition. It was Jesus. The figure wasn't like the images she had seen in paintings or on church windows. There were no flowing robes, no halo, no specific features she could describe. Instead, it was a being of light, radiating love and compassion in a way that left her awestruck. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, but words seemed meaningless here. Communication wasn't verbal, it was something deeper, more immediate, as though her very soul was speaking directly to his. "You are safe," the presence conveyed. The words weren't heard, but felt, resonating within her like a melody. The assurance in those simple words dissolved the last remnants of her fear. Sarah's mind swirled with confusion. "This can't be real. I don't believe in you. I've spent my whole life denying you." She expected judgment, anger, or even rejection. Instead, she felt only understanding. "I have always been with you," the presence continued. "Even when you did not believe, even when you turned away, I never left you. My love for you is not dependent on your belief." The statement hit her like a tidal wave, shattering her preconceived notions about faith and divinity. She had always imagined that if God existed, he would demand worship, adherence to strict rules, and unwavering devotion. But this being, this Jesus, was nothing like she had expected. He wasn't demanding or angry. He was kind, patient, and overwhelmingly compassionate. Images began to flash before her, scenes from her life playing out with vivid clarity. She saw moments she had long forgotten, times she had shown kindness to others, even in small ways, like comforting a grieving friend or rescuing a stray animal. She also saw moments of pain and regret, times she had been harsh or dismissive, driven by her own fears and insecurities. But there was no judgment in these visions, only understanding. Each moment was presented as part of a tapestry, showing her how every action, every choice had shaped her journey. Sarah wanted to ask so many questions. Why do you allow suffering? Why did you take my daughter? Why didn't you reveal yourself before now? The questions burned within her, but before she could form them, the presence responded, not with words, but with a deep, resonant truth that filled her being. She understood, in a way that defied logic, that love and free will were at the heart of everything. The universe was not random, nor was it rigidly controlled. It was a dance of choices, connections, and the endless flow of love. Tears of joy and sorrow mingled within her as she realized how much she had misunderstood. All her life, she had searched for answers in logic and science, dismissing anything that couldn't be measured or proven. Yet here, in this place beyond time and space, she found a truth that transcended understanding. It wasn't about proof, it was about trust, connection, and the boundless love that had always been present, even when she couldn't see it. As the light around her grew brighter, Sarah felt herself being drawn closer to it, as though she were on the verge of merging with something far greater than herself. She wasn't afraid anymore. In fact, she felt a longing to stay in this place, to remain in the presence of this love forever. But then a new sensation emerged, a pull in the opposite direction. It was gentle yet insistent, like a hand guiding her back. She realized, with a mix of sorrow and acceptance, that her time here wasn't over. She wasn't meant to stay. As Sarah felt herself being drawn back from the light, a pang of resistance surged through her. For the first time in years, perhaps in her entire life, she had experienced a peace that defied explanation, a love that seemed infinite and unconditional. The thought of leaving this place, this presence, was unbearable. She wanted to stay, to merge fully with the warmth and light, to escape the burdens and uncertainties of her earthly life. But the pull back toward the other realm, grew stronger. And the presence, the one she now knew as Jesus, gently conveyed to her, without words, that her journey was not yet complete. "You still have more to do." The message resonated, though it wasn't spoken. It echoed within her, clear and undeniable. The idea baffled her. What more could she possibly do? She had spent her life as an atheist, rejecting the very existence of the being now standing before her. She had no faith, no mission, no desire to become some kind of spiritual crusader. What could someone like her possibly contribute? Her confusion deepened as another vision unfolded before her. She saw herself as a child, no more than 7 or 8 years old, standing in her backyard on a summer evening. She had forgotten this moment until now. In the vision, she was holding a small butterfly with injured wings. She remembered how carefully she had tried to mend it, even though she knew it was likely futile. The memory brought a pang of bittersweet emotion. She had always dismissed it as a childish act, insignificant and naive. But now, in this place of truth, she saw it differently. Through the vision, she understood. Her compassion, even in small moments, had ripple effects she couldn't begin to comprehend. The butterfly's survival, or lack thereof, wasn't the point. What mattered was the love and care she had poured into the act. A love that had extended far beyond that single moment. This theme repeated in other scenes, helping a classmate who was bullied, staying late at work to assist a struggling colleague, comforting a grieving friend after a loss. These were the quiet, unassuming moments that she had never thought much about. But now, they shone with a radiant significance. "You are capable of great love," the presence conveyed, and Sarah felt a mixture of awe and shame. She had spent so much of her life convinced that belief in God or the divine was unnecessary for goodness. And here she was, being shown that the goodness in her had always been part of a greater plan. A plan she hadn't recognized. It wasn't about religion or dogma. It was about love, connection, and the choices she made to spread kindness in a world often filled with pain. "But why me?" she thought, her disbelief still lingering. "Why show me this now? I don't deserve this. I've denied you my whole life." Again, there was no judgment in the response, only compassion. "My love is not conditional," the presence conveyed. "It is not earned. It simply is. Even when you turned away, I was with you. Even when you doubted, I believed in you." The message was simple, yet its implications were profound. All her life, Sarah had thought of faith as something transactional, something people gave in exchange for blessings, comfort, or a place in heaven. She had rejected it because it seemed illogical, self-serving, and hypocritical. But here, in the presence of this love, she realized she had misunderstood entirely. Love wasn't a transaction. It was the essence of existence. And it wasn't reserved for believers alone. It was for everyone, always. Her mind swirled with questions, but one rose above the rest, pressing against her consciousness with urgency. Why do you allow suffering? The words were not spoken aloud, but the presence understood her perfectly. She expected a complex answer, some grand revelation that would finally resolve the doubts and anger she had harbored for so long. Instead, what she received was a feeling, deep, resonant, and full of sorrow and hope. "Suffering is not my will," the presence conveyed. "It is a consequence of the choices given to all beings. Free will is the greatest gift, but it comes with the risk of pain. Yet even in suffering, I am there. I bring healing, redemption, and love to all who seek it. What is broken can be mended, but the journey is theirs to take. Sarah wrestled with this idea. She thought of her daughter, Emma, and the pain of losing her. Could she truly accept that this loss was not a punishment, not part of some cruel divine plan, but simply a piece of a larger, incomprehensible tapestry? The idea felt both comforting and difficult to embrace. Yet, in that moment, she also felt a new sensation, a connection to Emma that she couldn't explain. It was as if her daughter's presence, her essence, was part of the very light surrounding her. "She has always been with you?" the presence conveyed gently. "Her love has never left you?" The revelation overwhelmed Sarah. She felt an ache in her chest, a longing for her daughter that she had buried for years under layers of bitterness and denial. But now, instead of despair, there was a sense of peace. Emma wasn't gone. Not really. Her love, her light, had never disappeared. It had simply transformed, becoming part of the larger whole. As the visions faded, Sarah found herself back in the presence of the light, now brighter and more encompassing than before. She wanted to stay, to remain in this state of pure love and understanding. But the pull back to her earthly life grew stronger, and she realized, with a mix of sorrow and acceptance, that her journey was far from over. "You must return," the presence conveyed, though there was no force in the words, only an invitation. "You have more to share, more to give. What you have seen here is not an ending, but a beginning." The idea both terrified and exhilarated her. She had spent her entire life rejecting faith, and now she was being called to embrace it, not as a doctrine, but as a way of living, a way of loving. Could she do it? Could she face the skepticism of others, the ridicule she had once so easily dished out? Could she accept this new truth and carry it forward into a world that might not believe her? As she felt herself being pulled back into her body, the light began to fade, though its warmth remained. One final message resonated within her, filling her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. You are loved, always. Share that love. With that, Sarah felt herself slipping away from the light and back into the world of the living. Sarah awoke with a jolt, her body shivering despite the warmth of the hospital room. Her vision was blurry, and the rhythmic beeping of monitors filled the air, grounding her in a reality that felt distant and unfamiliar. As her senses adjusted, she realized she was alive, though her chest ached and her limbs felt heavy. The fluorescent lights above her seemed harsh, almost alien, after the radiant warmth of the light she had just experienced. Her mind struggled to reconcile the overwhelming presence of love and light she had just left with the sterile, cold environment she now found herself in. A nurse entered the room, smiling warmly. "Welcome back," she said gently. "You gave us quite a scare." Sarah tried to respond, but her throat was dry, and her voice came out as a raspy whisper. The nurse quickly poured her a glass of water and helped her sip it slowly. As the cool liquid eased her throat, Sarah's thoughts began to race. Had it all been real? The light, the presence, the overwhelming love. Had she truly experienced it, or was it a hallucination brought on by the brink of death? The nurse left to fetch the doctor, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She looked down at her hands, noticing the IV lines and the faint tremor in her fingers. She felt fragile, as if her body had been pushed to its limits. Yet, beneath the exhaustion, there was something else, a flicker of peace she couldn't explain. It was as though the warmth of the light still lingered, a faint glow deep within her. When the doctor arrived, he explained what had happened. "You suffered a major heart attack," he said, his tone professional but kind. We were able to stabilize you, but it was a close call. You were unresponsive for several minutes. Honestly, it's remarkable that you're awake and coherent. Most people in your condition..." He trailed off, shaking his head as if words failed him. "Let's just say you're very lucky." Sarah nodded numbly, barely hearing his words. She wasn't sure if she believed in luck anymore. The idea of divine intervention felt absurd, yet she couldn't shake the sense that she had been sent back for a reason. Her thoughts drifted to the presence she had encountered, the love that had enveloped her. It felt more real than the bed she was lying in, more true than the doctor's clinical explanations. As the days passed and Sarah began to recover, she found herself grappling with an overwhelming mix of emotions. The scientific part of her, the part that had always demanded evidence and logic, tried to dismiss her experience as a vivid hallucination. Perhaps it was the result of oxygen deprivation or neural misfires during her cardiac arrest. She had read about such phenomena before, the so-called near-death experiences, that many dismissed as the brain's final attempts to make sense of its own shutdown. But another part of her, the part that had felt the presence, the love, and the undeniable truth of what she had seen, refused to let go. She found herself reliving the moments over and over in her mind, trying to make sense of them. How could something so profound, so life-altering, be reduced to mere chemical reactions? And if it was real, if she truly had encountered Jesus, what did that mean for her life now? When she was finally discharged from the hospital, Sarah returned home to a life that felt both familiar and foreign. Her house was just as she had left it, tidy, quiet, and filled with remnants of her structured, orderly existence. Yet, everything felt different. The books on her shelves, many of them on science, philosophy, and the rejection of faith, now seemed hollow, their arguments unable to capture the depth of what she had experienced. Even her beloved garden, once a source of pride and peace, felt like a shadow of the light she had encountered. She tried to slip back into her old routines, but it was impossible. The experience had changed her in ways she couldn't yet articulate. For the first time in her life, she felt an ache not for knowledge, but for meaning. The questions she had spent decades avoiding now loomed large in her mind. What is my purpose? What does it mean to love? How can I reconcile the life I've lived with the truth I've seen? Her friends noticed the change almost immediately. Sarah, once so sharp and quick to debate, now seemed quieter, more reflective. When one of her closest friends, Margaret, visited her a week after her discharge, she couldn't hide her curiosity. "You seem different," Margaret said, her tone cautious. "I mean, after what you've been through, that's understandable. But there's something else. What happened to you, Sarah?" Sarah hesitated, unsure how to explain. How could she put into words something so profound, so beyond the realm of everyday understanding? "I had an experience," she said finally, her voice soft. "While I was gone, I saw something. Someone." Margaret's brow furrowed. "You mean like a dream?" "No," Sarah replied firmly. "It wasn't a dream. It was real, more real than this." She gestured vaguely around the room, her hands trembling slightly. "I saw light. I felt him." "Him?" Margaret echoed, her skepticism evident. "You're not saying—" "I saw Jesus," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. "I didn't believe in him. I didn't believe in anything. But he was there, Margaret. And he loved me. He knew me." Margaret stared at her, stunned. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Margaret said, "Sarah, you've been through a lot. Near-death experiences can be strange. Maybe your brain was... No, Sarah interrupted, her tone uncharacteristically forceful. It wasn't my brain. It wasn't a hallucination. I know what I saw, what I felt. It was real. Margaret's expression softened, but her skepticism didn't fade. I don't know what to say, she admitted. I mean, you've always been the last person I'd expect to believe something like that. Sarah gave a small, sad smile. I wouldn't have believed it either, if it hadn't happened to me. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah began to share her story with others, though always cautiously. Most people reacted with disbelief or polite skepticism, and she couldn't blame them. She had spent her entire life dismissing such stories, after all. But there were a few who listened, their eyes widening with recognition or curiosity. Some shared their own experiences, stories they had kept hidden for fear of being ridiculed. Sarah found comfort in these connections, realizing she wasn't as alone as she had feared. Yet even as she began to embrace this new truth, doubts lingered. What if she was wrong? What if her experience had been nothing more than a trick of the mind? She wrestled with these questions late into the night, her thoughts looping in endless circles. But each time the doubts threatened to consume her, she would close her eyes and remember the light, the warmth, the presence that had known her completely and loved her unconditionally. And in those moments, she found the strength to take another step forward. In the months that followed her return, Sarah's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The world she once thought she knew so well, the world she had navigated with reason and skepticism, now felt like uncharted territory. The experience she had undergone left her with a profound sense of responsibility. Yet she struggled to understand how to fulfill it. What could she, a lifelong atheist, possibly do to honor what she had seen and felt? At first, Sarah tried to keep the experience to herself. She was afraid of ridicule, afraid of being dismissed as delusional or overly emotional. The last thing she wanted was to become the subject of whispers or condescending pity among her friends and colleagues. Yet the memories of her encounter with the light and the presence of Jesus burned within her. She felt as though she had been handed a gift too precious to hide. Slowly, she began to speak. Her first attempt came during a small dinner with her closest friends, the ones she trusted most. They had gathered to celebrate her recovery, and the evening had been filled with laughter and light conversation. But as the night wore on, Sarah felt a growing pressure in her chest, a need to say something that couldn't wait any longer. She cleared her throat, and the table grew quiet. "There's something I need to share," she began, her voice trembling. "Something that happened to me while I was in the hospital." Her friends leaned in, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Sarah hesitated, then took a deep breath and told them everything about the darkness, the light, the presence, and the overwhelming love she had felt. She described the way Jesus had shown her her life, the moments she had dismissed as insignificant that now shone with meaning. She even shared the message he had given her, that love was the ultimate purpose, and that she had a role to play in sharing it. When she finished, the silence was deafening. Her friends exchanged uncertain glances, their expressions ranging from disbelief to discomfort. Finally, one of them, Rachel, broke the silence. "That's quite a story," Rachel said carefully. "I'm glad you're okay, Sarah, but are you sure it wasn't just, your brain playing tricks on you? Near-death experiences can be really vivid." Sarah nodded, expecting this reaction. "I've thought about that," she admitted. "I've read all the studies, all the theories, but this wasn't like anything I've ever read about. It was more real than anything I've ever experienced. I can't explain it, but I know it was real." Her friends' responses were polite, but skeptical. They changed the subject quickly, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. Yet, she understood their reactions. After all, she would have responded the same way not long ago. She resolved not to let their doubt deter her. She had a truth to share, and she would find the right way to share it. Over time, Sarah's circle of influence expanded. She began speaking more openly, not just to friends, but to acquaintances, co-workers, and even strangers. Her approach was never pushy or preachy. She had no interest in converting anyone or forcing her beliefs onto others. Instead, she spoke from the heart, simply recounting what she had experienced and what it had taught her. To her surprise, some people were deeply moved. They thanked her for her honesty and shared their own stories of loss, doubt, and unexpected faith. One of the most profound moments came during a chance encounter at a coffee shop. Sarah was sitting alone, reading a book, when a young woman approached her table. The woman, who introduced herself as Emily, hesitated before speaking. "I'm sorry to bother you," Emily said, her voice trembling. "But I overheard you talking to someone the other day. You mentioned Jesus." Sarah nodded, setting her book aside. "I did. Why do you ask?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I've been struggling with my faith for years," she confessed. "I felt so lost, so disconnected. Hearing you talk about your experience, it gave me hope. I don't know why, but it did." The two women talked for hours, sharing their fears, doubts, and hopes. By the end of their conversation, Emily said she felt a renewed sense of purpose, and Sarah realized that her story could touch lives in ways she hadn't anticipated. Encounters like this became more frequent. Sarah found herself drawn to people who were hurting, doubting, or searching for meaning. She didn't have all the answers, but she didn't need to. Her story wasn't about answers, it was about love, connection, and the courage to embrace the unknown. Of course, not everyone was receptive. Some people dismissed her outright, rolling their eyes or even mocking her. Others accused her of fabricating the story for attention. These reactions hurt, but they didn't deter her. Each time she faced skepticism, she reminded herself of the light, the presence, and the love she had felt. She knew her truth, and that was enough. As she continued on this path, Sarah began to notice changes within herself. She was more patient, more compassionate, and more willing to listen to others without judgment. She volunteered more frequently at the animal shelter, finding joy in caring for creatures that couldn't repay her. She reached out to estranged family members, mending relationships she had once thought irreparable. Even her garden, which had once felt like a shadow of her experience, took on new meaning. Each flower she tended became a reminder of the beauty and fragility of life. Eventually, Sarah was invited to speak at a local community center. The event was small, just a gathering of a few dozen people curious about near-death experiences, but it marked a turning point. Standing before the audience, Sarah felt a surge of nerves, but she also felt a deep sense of purpose. She began her talk not with grand declarations, but with humility. "I don't have all the answers," she said. "I'm not here to tell you what to believe or how to live your life. I can only share my story, the story of an atheist who thought she had everything figured out, only to discover that there's so much more to this life than we can see or measure." By the end of her talk, several people approached her, thanking her for her vulnerability and courage. Some shared their own stories of faith and doubt, while others simply expressed gratitude for her willingness to speak openly about something so personal. Sarah realized that her story wasn't just about her. It was about the connections it created, the way it inspired others to reflect on their own lives and beliefs. As the years passed, Sarah's mission evolved. She began writing about her experience, crafting essays and articles that blended her scientific background with the spiritual truths she had encountered. Her writing resonated with people from all walks of life, sparking conversations and encouraging others to explore the mysteries of faith and love. Sarah never saw herself as a preacher or a prophet. She was just a woman who had been given a glimpse of something extraordinary and felt compelled to share it. And in doing so, she discovered that her life had more meaning than she had ever imagined. The journey wasn't easy, and the doubts never completely disappeared, but the light within her remained, guiding her through each step. In the end, Sarah came to understand that her experience wasn't just a revelation, it was an invitation to live more fully, love more deeply, and trust in the mystery of a universe far greater than she could ever comprehend. And for the first time in her life, she accepted that invitation with an open heart.